I'm going to be talking a little bit about the archive, our activities, how you can take advantage of our collections, and also speak briefly about the film prints that have screened and will be screening as part of the Art and Protest film series. So let's see if this works. There we go. So this is the new home of the Yale Film Archive as of 2020. It is located on the 7th floor of Sterling Memorial Library here on Central Campus at Yale. It is a beautiful space. We're really proud of it. And if you've never been, I'd encourage you to come up and take a look. Just head up to the 7th floor. We're really the only occupants up there besides the book stacks. And even if you're not interested in viewing any films, you can soak in the lovely view that we have of the campus and 3 directions from one of the highest vantage points on campus. So please do stop by. We have a massive video collection. That's how most people probably come to encounter our collections. 50,000 items on DVD, Blu-ray, and legacy formats such as VHS and Laserdisc. They're all located here in Sterling Memorial Library. We can pull them for you to view in one of the 10 viewing booths or the 1 screening room that we have in our space. And in the days of streaming, as you probably have encountered, not everything is available on those streaming services, and what is available can come and go at the whim of the streaming providers. So owning physical media like we do is a real asset for continuing to provide accessibility to these moving image items into the future. This is the section of the film archive that I work in. This is what we call the film conservation area. So I oversee the 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, and the 8 and Super 8 millimeter films in our collection. And everything you see in this room is equipment designed to help view, repair, inspect, and transfer those types of films. So we have flatbed viewing machines on the left there. We have 2 inspection benches for hand winding through film. We have a bunch of film reels in the back wall there that you can see. And then on the right-hand side, we have a film transfer system, which can transfer anything but 35 millimeter. So all of the smaller gauges to digital form. And this is key for things like home movies or unique items that we can't regularly project, but we want to provide access to. This is our beloved screening room here in the film archive. This seats 22. It has a big screen, 7.1 surround sound, flexible masking to accommodate films of any aspect ratio. And we can project pretty much any format except 35 millimeter here. So 16 millimeter film, and then VHS, Laserdisc, Blu-ray, DVD, streaming, and 3D Blu-ray. This is the only place on campus you can view 3D complete with the glasses. So this is a wonderful space that can be booked by students and faculty and staff for their own use. You could view a film by yourself or with 21 of your friends. And it's open the same hours as the film archive, and it's located just across the hall from my office here. This is another view of the screening room with the 16 millimeter projectors in action. This is really one of the only places, actually, it is the only place on campus where you can view 16 millimeter without having to book a projectionist. You need to book me, but it's part of my job and I do it all the time. So I'm always happy to screen 16 millimeter films here, so long as they are being screened for a reason. They're unique, they're rare, they're not available on streaming formats, they're not available in our physical media collection. It's always a good opportunity to screen 16 millimeter in here, and I'm always happy to do it. I'm going to talk about 4 kind of basic aspects of what we do: collection, preservation, access, and education. So starting with collection, this is what our film collection looks like. This is the Library Shelving Facility, or LSF, in Hamden, where all of Yale Library's offsite storage is. And these are reels of film that are part of our collection. They're mixed in with lots of other different types of items that find a safe, secure, and climate-controlled home at LSF. Films don't always look like that. This is an example of how a film collection arrived to me a few years ago. It's kind of disgusting looking and fairly desperate looking, but in the end, film is incredibly resilient. And except for maybe 1 reel in this picture, all of the reels turned out to be just fine and are now neatly wound and stored in archivally sound cans and encores, and are in that library shelving facility preserved for the future. So these films are all probably about 100 years old. They are 16 millimeter films from the early 1920s. And despite looking so rough now, they are all in good shape. Films come to me in all sorts of different shapes and sizes: boxes, cans, envelopes, sometimes in really nice containers like they were sent around the world in. This is the film collection of the director James Ivory, whom you see here with me on the right. He donated his film print collection to Yale a few months back. On the left are a bunch of sound and picture reels stuffed into the back of my car. So it's always exciting when you get new films because you never know what's inside the box. And most of the time, to be totally honest, they are in really great shape because film, as I said, is remarkably resilient. That's one of the reasons why we love it. Another aspect of our collection policy or our collection activities is the generation of brand new film prints. So instead of taking donations from filmmakers and collectors and families, we are now making brand new 35 millimeter film prints of classic films. So we see here Chinatown on the left and Days of Heaven on the right. Through collaborative relationships with studios and archives and film labs, of which there are not very many left in the world, we have been able to make new film prints of important films for our collection. And if you ever attend any of our Treasures from the Yale Film Archive screenings, you've no doubt seen some of these new film prints, like The Godfather and Mildred Pierce and other films. We'll be screening these films, hopefully, in the not too distant future. Moving on to preservation. A lot of people wonder, well, what actually is preservation when you're talking about film? Preservation means taking the best original surviving element, for example, this film Shades here, for which we just won a National Film Preservation Grant to preserve. This is the original film negative. A and B roll picture negative is what that sign means, what that label means. And that means the actual film that was in the camera when the film was made. And that is, by definition, the best element to work from. And so that's what we do. We take the best element to work from and we make new copies of it, essentially. I'm going to walk you through how this works with an example from our collection. Over the last, I guess, 18 years, or no, sorry, 14 years. I can't do math at this moment. 15 years. We've received nearly $300,000 in grants from two granting agencies, mostly the National Film Preservation Foundation and also the Film Foundation, founded by Martin Scorsese, to preserve 18 short and feature films in our collection. This grant money is absolutely essential to doing the work that we do. Film preservation can be a fairly expensive endeavor. One film might cost anywhere from $8,000 to $80,000 to preserve, depending on the length and obviously the complexity and the condition of the materials. So I'm going to walk us through how we preserved a film called James Baldwin from Another Place, which is a documentary short made in 1973 about James Baldwin when he was living in exile in Turkey. The film was made by Sedat Pekai, who was a graduate of the Yale School of Art and a photographer and filmmaker. First, we'll start with the sound. What we want to do is we want to digitally capture the sound sources so we can do a little cleanup to them. Now, we never want to make it sound better than it did originally, but we want to make it sound as good as it did originally and sort of take away and erase any of the ravages of time. So in this case, we can start with a 35 millimeter track negative, which luckily we had. We can also start with a 35 millimeter magnetic soundtrack, which is even better quality and would be the best thing to start with. We can also start with 1/4-inch magnetic tape. These are the three most common types of sound recording that we end up with from films from this era, say the 1960s to the 1980s in the pre-digital era. Those are scanned at a sound laboratory and restored to remove pops and clicks and hisses that would have accrued over time. Then they end up with a wave file, a broadcast wave file, which is the restored soundtrack in its best form. That restored soundtrack then gets shot back to a 35 millimeter optical track negative because the end goal of our film preservation always includes making a new film print. It's the most authentic way to show the film, and it's still the best and most reliable way to preserve the film. So we'll hold on to that restored 35 millimeter optical track negative as we begin the next step, which is the picture. So in this case, we were lucky enough to have the original negative. Again, this is the film that was in the camera when the film was shot. From that original negative, we will make a fine-grained master, which is a positive. It looks like a print, but it has no sound, and it actually is kind of low contrast. It wouldn't be a very good thing to show through a projector, but it contains all the detail of the film, and it's a good protection for that original negative. From that, continuing the negative-positive chain, we go to a preservation duplicate negative. And this is what we use to make prints. We don't want to print a whole bunch from the original negative because it could damage it and it might be fragile. But now that we have a new negative to print from, we can print multiple prints without fearing any damage. And at this point, we'll bring in that soundtrack that we created before, and we will marry the two, the new restored optical soundtrack with the new preserved duplicate negative, and we can make what's called an answer print. And that print shows us what the negative looks like and what the audio negative sounds like. And we make sure that they both sound and look good, do any kind of adjustments to the contrast, and if it's a color film, to the colors. And at the same time, we'll also get a 4K scan, so a super high resolution scan of that fine grain master, which is the digital side of the preservation effort. So now we have a film in print form that we can show, we have it in negative form that we can store, and we have a digital file, which is also a great way to provide access and gives us yet another backup. So speaking of access, how would we access these film prints? Well, the primary way is through our screening series. Both treasures from the Yale Film Archive and other films we bring in from other archives, distributors, and studios make up the Yale Film Archive screening calendar, of which this Art and Protest series is one part this year. So this is just the beginnings of our fall 2023 calendar, which you can see some of the screenings have already happened. Some of them are coming up. In fact, just this week, we have 2 screenings coming up on the 27th and 29th of October. So it's a very full schedule. We're screening almost every week, and that mostly, for the most part, takes place, as Tobias said, over at 320 York, the Humanities Quadrangle, in the lower level, both in the Alice Cinema, which is right here, our lovely film screening room, and also next door in the lecture hall, which is just literally to the left of where this picture was taken. The Alice Cinema seats 92, and it's a great place to watch a movie. I highly encourage you, if you're in New Haven, to please come watch a movie there with us. Our movies are always free and open to anyone. You can sign up for our mailing list on our website, and you can always get our up-to-date calendar listings on our website, which is library.yale.edu/film. So these are some film notes from one such screening we had last spring, in which we did, in fact, screen that James Baldwin short film, along with some other films related to the Black Panthers here in New Haven. So taking it from the acquisition, you saw my trunk full of film. Then we get to the grant stage, where we received a grant from the National Film Preservation to preserve this film. Then through the kind of technical process of making the new film prints, and now here ending up with the screening. And so that's kind of the life cycle of getting a new collection in and preserving the film. Now, we also have Blu-rays and DVDs of the film here in our collection, so the film can be watched on site. And we've also lent the film to other institutions. In fact, this week in Vienna, Austria, if you happen to be going to the Biennale, you can watch this film as well as some preserved outtakes from this James Baldwin film in Vienna at the Biennale, which we're very excited about. Another way we provide access to elements in our collection are through these interviews, which I did during the pandemic. The Yale Film Archive Filmmaker Conversations. If you are not around and you want to take a sample of some of our collections and hear from some filmmakers whose work we've preserved, I encourage you to visit vimeo.com/Yale Film Archive. And among many other things, you can find these and more filmmaker conversations. And the last thing I'll talk about today is education. The education aspect obviously permeates throughout everything we do, but in particular, I wanted to highlight a couple of things. I teach a course on the Film Archive. It's a little bit of, sort of preservation of our own field and of this knowledge. We want to pass on what it means to work in a film archive and what it means to preserve films and what it means to think about films, not just as texts, but as objects, as material. And so I teach a graduate course on the Film Archive, and there's a wonderful culminating screening every spring at the end of the semester. We screen films preserved and researched and repaired and presented by those students. And so we have a screening usually of 5 or 6 films, and we call it Class Pictures. It'll be happening this May, and I encourage you to check it out on our calendar because it's always a lot of fun. We also have students come in and do their own filmmaking in the Film Archive. So every fall, we have an animation class that comes in and hand animates on film, directly on film without using a camera. So they scratch into the film or they color on the film, and then we project the film, and then we scan the film all in a day. And it's a really wonderful moment to see these things, you see these films come from inspiration to idea to execution to screening. And here we're using the transfer system to actually screen a film that was just made minutes before. So it's a kind of a nice sort of lesson in how, what it takes to make a film, not using digital tools, but using pen and scratching tools and film itself. We can also we also do a lot of projecting for courses and for researchers in our screening room. This is what it looks like from the booth to screen a 16mm print. And of course, we also have all these screening series that we've talked about, including this collaboration with the Beinecke for the Art and Protest series. I'll just talk quickly about these 3 films. These are obviously phenomenal films that that we and the Beinecke have chosen to present to you. They represent some different aspects of our collection. Medium Cool is actually a film print we made in 2018 in collaboration with the Academy Film Archive, my colleagues there, and also Paramount Studios, and YCM Laboratories, one of the last remaining film laboratories in the United States. And so it was great to be able to make a new print of that film for our collection, one which will last hundreds of years. The other 2 films were acquired in the 2000s. We have them on 35mm prints, but they were ones that we acquired from outside the lab and studio pipeline. And we're always trying to acquire new and even used film prints when they're important films for our collection, because it's just really important for us to be able to have these film prints that last, that are a great representation of the way the filmmakers intended the films to be seen, and that can be used to share with Yale and New Haven and Connecticut and regional audiences for years to come. That's all I have today. I just blew through this whole presentation in under 20 minutes. Look at that. So I would love to take any of your questions if you have any. And on behalf of my colleagues, Michael Kerbel, Archer Nielsen, and Zoe Portman, thank you very much for your attention.